us of the Great Lakes system that survive Great Lakes, Superior, Huron, Michigan, Erie, and Ontario. The rivers and canals between them and the minor lakes like Lake St. George, Lake Detroit, Lake Sault Ste. Marie, and others are the second largest body of fresh water in the world. The largest body of fresh water is, of course, the polar ice caps. They tell us that the Great Lakes system contains over 6 trillion gallons of water, and that is a real number. It is 6 followed by 15 zeros. And that's too big to imagine. Someone crunched the numbers and they came up with an interesting visual. If it were possible to pick up all the water to the Great Lakes, drop them on the lower 48 states, the 48 contiguous states, they would be buried to more than 9 feet deep. Lake Erie is the 4th largest of the Great Lakes. I think that's a fine way of saying she's the 2nd smallest. She is the shallowest and the warmest. Her temperature today is a balmy 68 degrees here in Erie. If that doesn't sound warm, that's okay. Lake Erie has an interesting characteristic. We have a well-defined thermal climate. Top 15 to 20 feet of water today, as I said, is 68 degrees. Once you descend below 30 degrees, it drops quickly to the mid or upper 30s. Lake Erie is 240 miles long. Her widest point is 65 miles. Her narrowest is 25 miles right here at Presque Isle. And no, from the water we cannot see Canada. The horizon is at 14 miles. We can see international waters, but not Canada. Her average depth is 57 feet, with the deepest point being 210 feet off Long Point, Ontario. The name comes from the native tribes that lived on the southern shores of Lake Erie until they were exterminated and driven west. During the bigger wars, they were the Erie Indians. The Iroquois had Dutch firearms, but they felt very threatened by the Eries because they were taking in refugees from the various tribes the Iroquois were at war at, such as the Venango, the Tobacco, the Huron, and Neutral Indians, so they attacked and drove them out. The name Eries comes from the French word fortress. We know that the pet cat that we have, the cat that we keep as pets, came over from the old world with the colonists. Archaeologists have not found anything to indicate that the Eries passed from the old world with the colonists. Archaeologists have not found anything to indicate that the Erie passed under the native wildcat. The writings from the Iroquois confirm that the Erie was quite fond of wearing had a large, straight, bushy tail, indicating facial weapons like that. We now believe the Franks are native Raccoon. Not having anything similar, Europe decided it. So a larger group of houses. The White House is just to the right at the top of the trees. You will see it. If you're having trouble, look for the 3 smokestacks just in front of the book. Location, the first was built in 1818. It was the first federally funded lighthouse on the Great Lakes. Stood 20 feet tall on top of a cliff. In 1857, a summer storm washed out the base of the cliff it sat on and it slid into the lake. They replaced it in 1858 with a 56-foot tall tower. Unfortunately, that one was built on unstable ground and began to sink. The current tower was built in 1867 and is 127 feet tall. House being built further along on the Great Lakes. It remained in this sad, decapitated condition until 2004 when the federal government provided a $300,000 grant to restore it to its former glory. They have obtained the original foot of Lighthouse Street, if you're interested. The 3 smokestacks I poured down, they left the smokestacks because captains of the large commercial vessels have a specific city along Lake Erie. Dobbins learned how to repair the ships and rose through the ranks. Eventually was made captain of the Salamis. He was out in Michigan getting a load of salt at a port when the British walked up and requested shelter for the night because word that we had declared war had not reached Michigan yet. The commandant opened the gate, or commander opened the gates of the fort and let the British in. The British captured that fort without a single shot fired. The British commander ordered any captain who would not swear to not attack British ships to be imprisoned in Canada. Dobbins was one of those who didn't swear. They were transported them back to Canada for trial. After the court had long known Dobbins threatened to November 30th every year. 30th every year. Trails, elevation decks along the more common east looms and turns. You might see peregrine falcons, cormorants, and I can confirm the bald eagles haven't returned again this summer. Off to our right, this green buoy is buoy 1. A little further out, you'll see a red one. That's buoy 2. All the green ones are numbered odd and are on the right side of that channel. All the red ones are numbered even and are on the west side. Buoy 1 is special. That design goes
야,
back to
submarine
the
어려?
days before radios were cheap enough that everyone could have it. If lake conditions are too rough for small crafts to be out here, that will be rocking enough to ring the bell. You were told if you can hear the bell ringing, you should be heading for shore. As I said, they sit on either side of the dredged out channels, and captains use a simple phrase, red right returning. Keep the red markers on your right when you're returning to the bay, and you will stay within the channel. I like to start Perry's story with his best friend. His name was James Lawrence. He was captain of the U.S. Chesapeake in early June of 1812 when the British attacked his ship and captured it. During the fighting, he was wounded and eventually died from his wounds, but his last words were his orders to the crew. When his first mate was able to inform Perry of his passing, he included the last words that Lawrence had said. Perry was promoted and given command of the Lake Erie Fleet, sent here to Erie in June of 1813 to take over the fleet. He arrived and saw the Donalds and managed to build two brigs. They were 110 feet long, 35 feet wide, and 9 feet deep. He chose one to be his flagship and named it Lawrence. The other brig was named the Niagara. At this time, Perry knew that the British were blockading the mouth of the harbor in case we could get our boats out. Wanting to strike fear, he chose to have his friend's last words sewn on a flag and make it his personal standard. That is, they don't give up the ship flag. He had to solve the British blockading, but he also had to solve that sandbar. But don't worry, he was very clever and very lucky. He had heard about a Dutch innovation called the cannel, a large rectangular barge that is hollow. You sink it by filling it with water, push it under something, and pump the water out, and you raise whatever it was. He had Dobbins build 4 of these and took his resorted to kedging. That's where you take your anchor out in front of your boat and your dinghy, lifeboat, whatever you have. Some cases the water's shallow enough, you just walk it out and drop it. Then you use the ship's winch to pull the ship to the anchor, pick the anchor up, take it out, drop it. You keep doing that until you pull your boat free. They worked for 72 continuous hours to bring the Lawrence across, immediately started bringing the Niagara, had her free in 24 hours. History book tells us that they knew what needed to be done, were working very efficiently and very well as a team. They leave out an important detail. There was this nice Lawrence-shaped hole that they pulled the Niagara through. Perry's second problem was that blockade. He just waited till the British commander returned to Canada to resupply and began bringing his boats across. But his luck came into play. When they got to Canada, there was a celebration going on, and the British commander, thinking we were trapped inside the bay, decided to stay and enjoy it. They stayed a few extra days. By the time the British returned to within sight of the mouth of the channel, they could see this smaller gunboats in the Lawrence out and thought we were battle ready headed west. If they had chosen to engage, if Perry's luck had not held, we would have lost the Battle of Lake Erie. The Lawrence was across the sandbar and reinstalled her mast and her riggings, but she was defenseless. They were still reinstalling their cannons when we sighted the British sails. And the Lawrence would not have been able to come to the aid of her sister ship because she was still on the sandbar. We know that we engaged the British on September 10th, 1813 in Putin Bay. That's a small section of South Bass Island just north of Sandusky. We know that the Lawrence was disabled during the fighting. When a cannonball hit the main mast of the Lawrence and snapped it in half, Perry made the decision to transfer his command over to the Niagara. He gave the colors, the American flag, to the third officer on the Lawrence, boarded the ship's dinghy, and rowed 2 miles over to the Niagara to continue the fight. Aboard the Niagara, he ordered the ship to sail right through the middle of the enemy lines, firing cannons from both sides. I'm going to pause that and get back to us. Off to our right, this black and white building is officially Prescott North Pierhead Harbor Light. Nobody calls it that. It's either the North Pier Light, the Harbor Light, or the Channel Light. It is a solid steel skeleton built in France in 1858. When it was delivered, we installed it on the North Pier. As the pier has grown, it has been moved with it. A couple years after they installed it, they discovered it was rusting and put the signature black and white flagging you see today. It is the last remaining square pyramidal light in the world. It has a 1,000-watt red aircraft beacon with a Fresnel lens. Since it has a red light, it is not a lighthouse. It is one of the channel markers. If you look out towards the three smokestacks, you see it's matching one. This light replaced a wooden structure back where the Coast Guard station is today that perished in a summer storm in 1857. A captain of a small schooner was out on the lake when he saw the storm brewing. Realizing he was in peril, he tried to race the storm for the safety of the bay. He came in a bit too fast. He missed the channel and ran aground on the lake bottom. Unfortunately for him, that did not stop his ship. It ran ashore directly into the wooden lighthouse, knocking it over. I like to tell an urban legend here that kind of fits a supposed radio conversation between any aircraft carrier. I use the U.S. Lincoln because that's where I first heard it. And an unidentified ship, and it starts with the list of the aircraft carrier's radio operator saying, "Unidentified craft, recommend change your course 15 degrees north to avoid a collision." The reply came back, negative, recommend you change your course 15 degrees south to avoid collision. The Lincoln's radio operator had never had this happen. He grabbed the mic and said, "This is the radio operator on the USS Lincoln. Again, we recommend changing your course 15 degrees north to avoid collision. Reply came back this time, cannot comply. Recommend changing your course 15 degrees south to avoid collision. At this point, the captain was furious. His ship and his navy had been disrespected. He grabbed the mic, said, "I'm the captain of the USS Lincoln, an aircraft carrier in the United States Navy. We say again, change your course 15 degrees north to avoid collision." The reply was just 6 words. "We're a lighthouse, you're a call." It fits it. Through the trees off to your right, you may see some house roofs. They're not actually houses, but Prescott's famous houseboats. Their origin goes back to when Erie was still a small settlement, but growing quickly. Many industries, such as the fishing, the dock workers, the shipping, and ice industries needing workers to come help. Many immigrants came here, but they didn't want to pay the city's taxes. They found many creative ways to avoid them. Someone figured out I could build a raft, put a shack or shanty on it, lived in the ponds and lagoons on the peninsula for free. And yes, folks, they still do not pay city taxes. The state made this a park in 1925 and tried to evict them. They didn't think this was fair because they were here first. It ended up in federal court until the state offered a compromise. They said that you could remain on 2 conditions. The first is you can't be scattered everywhere. We want you in one body of water. They said okay. Went down originally to where Prescott Marina is today. 1950s moved up here to Horseshoe Pond. The second condition is there can never be any more than the current 24th. They said okay. I mentioned that the North Pier Light replaced one that was down by the Coast Guard station. Well, that's this red building off to our right. This building was built in 1985, houses 22 guardsmen, 6 reservists. In port right here, the largest boat is the 47-foot rescue launch. The smaller one right next to it is a 26-foot rapid response or speedboat. They also have a 14-foot ice rescue boat, which is not out for obvious reasons. That is a 14-foot aluminum fishing boat on skis. They patrol 660 square miles from Girard, Pennsylvania, west of us to Dunkirk, New York, east, and out to international waters. They are responsible for homeland security, search and rescue, maritime law enforcement, and winter rescue. They're proud of that 47-foot motor launch because they were one of the stations chosen to receive the first 100 of that new anti-capsize design delivered in the late 2000s. These boats, if hit by a wave that can capsize, will right themselves in less than 30 seconds. see it. She's not in port today. If you check marinetraffic.com, it looks like she's in the canal between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. She is returning to us from a year-long refit out at Boothby Bay, Maine, Sample Shipyard, where they have worked on her. Right here in the end of Dobbins Landing, this east end is a fine restaurant, Rum Runners. It has both indoor and outdoor dining for your convenience or your comfort during Erie's fickle weather. It is named after Erie's past during the days of Prohibition, when you could not buy alcohol in the United States, but could buy it in Canada. So fishermen would sail all the way to Canada, buy it, bring it back, smuggled under their fish. Little building right next to it in the back is Woody's Backyard Barge and Grill, another fine dining place down here. It also has both indoor and outdoor seating. Off to our other side, you see this big red boat. That's a pirate ship, Scallywag. They are currently looking for the little boat we see now, trying to capture him. He has stolen their pirate treasure map. Hopefully we won't get involved in the water cannon battle, but we might. If you're interested in taking the pirate adventure, it leaves here from Dobbins Landing on the southwest corner. As we turn around, coming on the north tip of Dobbins Landing, this beautiful rear wheel paddle boat comes into view. This is the Victorian Princess, who goes out for lunch and dinner cruises and sunset cruises. And on this end of Dobbins Landing, you can also see the Bicentennial Tower that I mentioned earlier.
पानी भयो नि पानी
Docked at the very tip of Dobbins Landing is this old wooden sailing ship. This is the Letty G. Howard. She is one of the tall ships. She is owned by New York City Marine Museum, or South Street Marine Museum, on semi-permanently loaned to us as our own tall ship. The Niagara does her duties elsewhere. She goes out for cruises and leaves from down here. As we make this turn around Dobbins Landing, directly in front of us is the west arm, and then this is where the Cove Restaurant is located. Again, it has indoor and outdoor dining for your comfort. And they make a great seafood quesadilla and real lemonade from the mix. Off to your right, you can see this building that looks like a ship. The architect designed it to bring to mind the early 1900s steaming ships, complete with 4 pillars on the roof to resemble smokestacks. This is the Erie Convention Center, a popular spot for graduations and larger celebrations. Things like the School Bus Driver Convention in July and the Hot Tub Convention in January. So this larger building coming into view is the Sheraton Hotel, one of your choices for lodging along the bayfront. This one is actually connected by a skywalk over to the convention center.
Wow.
white tank comes into
Pani
view.
sa pani.
This is necessary due to Erie's fickle weather. This is a popular spot for weddings, graduation and retirement parties. The tall building next to it is the Marriott Hotel and is also connected via halls to the convention center. These brick buildings off to your left, there's actually three in the foreground and one in the background. The largest on the east end and the one in the background. The one in the background's on the other side of the Bay Parkway. These two buildings are Erie's water work, with the one on the other side of the parkway being the pump house. From here, large pipes go out about 5 miles into the middle of the lake where it brings back water to be pumped into reservoirs throughout the city for use of the residents, visitors, and businesses. The narrower building in the middle belongs to Mercyhurst. It is the rowing club for both the high school and university. And the smallest building on the end is where you can rent watercraft, sport watercraft such as pontoon boats, jet skis, such. We did not get out to the Prescott Light due to lake conditions. It's rather choppy out there. It is at Beach 9 if you wish to go and visit it. It is a museum open till 4:30. It was built in 1871, dedicated in 1872. First lit July 12, 1873. The house attached was originally the quarters for the lighthouse keepers, then their family would stay with them when allowed, became the assistant park rangers, and then a private residence is now part of the museum. The first lighthouse keeper earned $520 a year. For that amount of money, every 6 hours he climbed 78 steps to the top of that 68-foot tall tower, where he polished the lenses, trimmed the wicks, refilled the lanterns, and reset the clockworks. That light at that time operated with a series of weights moving the lenses around the light. It originally burned whale oil that was converted to kerosene when someone found crude oil on the peninsula and built a small refinery. Later converted to electricity, today it is on Erie's electric grid with a backup diesel generator. When they first converted it to electricity, they put a small wattage lamp, about 100 watts, what we might put in our living room, earning it the nickname the flashlight. Today it has a 1,000-watt aircraft beacon with a Fresnel lens. It can be seen at water level for 14 miles, more than 20 miles in the air. We've reached the east basin of the Bayfront Marina. Prescott Light cost $15,000 to build, which doesn't seem like a lot of money, but back in the 1970s it was a pretty good amount. The reason for it is Erie was not a big settlement, so they had to get the brick, the steel, and the glass down here from either Buffalo on boat or up from Pittsburgh on wagon. They brought it to the port of Erie, loaded it onto barges, sailed it around to the lighthouse to build it. This entrance here is for Perry Yacht Club, a private marina. After a summer storm broke one of the barges free that was carrying 3,000 bricks or 6,000 bricks, which floated all the way up to Beach 10 before sinking, they only took them across to Misery Bay, loaded it on the way